Hey friends, welcome. Got another dealer with us today for a Pick Six conversation. He's supplied me his 6 questions, and we're going to do what both of us do a lot of the time, which is talk buy here, pay here.
Right.
This is especially fun for me. I got Joe Powell out of Southwest Oklahoma. It's got multiple locations down in that corner of the country, and so he's he naturally moves to the top of the favorite dealers list because he's from my home state of Oklahoma. So we're glad to have you here, Joe. I'm glad to get to know you, of course, through our V8 dealer groups, and know a little bit about your operation. And before we kick off, Joe, you sent me your 6 questions, and I have one that I've thought about that our listeners would enjoy hearing, I'm sure, which is you're in a Lease Here Pay Here model down there and have been for many years. Can you talk to us about what motivated you to do that? Why Lease Here Pay Here for you?
Many people know I come from the agriculture background, so I was in farm equipment for a long time. Then I went over to the franchise world and worked in a Chevrolet and Cadillac dealership. And we all get the magazines, and I kept seeing some magazines based on lease to own. And it kept talking about quicker, easier, and simpler. And that's kind of the way I like to do things. The accounting was easier. The repos were easier. The bankruptcy was easier. And not that it's perfect by any means, but it allowed me an opportunity to look at the GM leases we were doing at the time to make sure that the customer had some form of payoff, make sure it was good for the customer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm pretty concerned with my customers and my employees, because like Zig Ziglar said many years ago, if all those people are taken care of, I'll probably be taken care of on the end of it as well.
Right.
So we've never changed our model. We started out in Lease Here Pay Here back in May of 2008. That's all we've done. That's all we do today. Obviously, we'll sell a car here and there, but it's the one-off. It's not the norm.
Right.
And then we do buy here, pay here on our residual accounts that come in their final 6 months of payoff. So we just thought it was good for the customer. It was good for us. So we move forward with it.
Yeah, nice. Two other things I know that are good for you that you didn't mention is one is you avoid the need to have a separate related finance company, and then you also get to spread your sales tax out over the contract. So it keeps you as a dealer from having to pony up that sales tax up front. So that's another big benefit. So yeah, I'd forgotten. I think you shared that with me some time ago about the equipment leasing background. And so that all makes a lot of sense. I think, when I look at it, it's structured the same for the consumer. From the consumer standpoint, they get a car, they have a down payment, they have a payment. And in your case, you're making sure that they have an option to own if they choose to do that. Right. So it's all good.
We always want to show a person how to get to a zero balance and get the title. A lot of people say that you'll never own the car, which is a myth and not fact. We show people, how do you get to a zero balance? How do you take the title home with you?
Good. Nice. Yeah, I love that. All right. So let's get to your questions, shall we? I've got them where I can kind of put them on the screen. Let's do this first one here. The first one is, since you started, how has your business model shifted? You talked about staying in the Lease Here Pay Here side, but other areas or other ways that your model has shifted, cost to car, any of those kind of things?
And some of these answers kind of run together. We did incorporate reinsurance several years ago. That's been a game changer for me personally. It's an opportunity to move dollars out of the company at a higher tax rate and move it off to offshore. So that's been a huge benefit to us. Cost of cars, we started way back in 2008. I went to a GSA sale and I bought 6 cars that day, a couple of old Malibu Classics, a couple of Dodge Stratuses. So that was our initial start, was probably 3 Dodge Stratuses in 2008 and a couple of Malibu Classics, probably all 2006 models. So we bought a lot of GSA cars over the years. we tried to go a little bit higher price car, thinking that we might get a better customer, and it doesn't always equate to that. So we've kind of backed up a little bit. We're trying to do safe and reliable cars at a fair price, and that seems to work better for us. When we started out, obviously we had a lender. We were able to wean ourselves off that after several years. So everything we do now is based on cash flow, and that's kind of the cars we buy or don't buy. And we kind of, if we get a car back, it's got good bones to it, we'll rebuild it and make another car out of it. If I spend $2,500 on a car that has, like I said, good bones and not rusted out or anything, it's a lot better than going and spending $6,000 at an auction to replace that car.
Amen. Yeah. So you got to focus on cash flow there, which I think, for folks who are listening who are newer to the business, then obviously I always talk about, you really have kind of an equity driven focus in your model, sales, profits, equity, or you have a cash flow focused model. And I know you well enough to know that, but as you touched on it, I would have you kind of explain, and maybe we can talk about like what was the year like for you in 2025 from a cash flow standpoint? And before you answer, most of our dealers have been really beat up in terms of charge-offs, at high repos and charge-offs in 2024 and again in 2025. So how's that really affected your cash flow?
Well, 2025 was really the tale of two halves, if you will. The first 8 months of the year, we try to do our thing, and we try to not mess with what other people are doing, whether how many thousands of accounts they have. We just do what we do. So we try to cash flow and create about $4 million a year. And for the first 8 months of the year, we were projected over $8 million. And we were running that at the end of every month. And then September hit, and September, October, November, and December brought us back down to our 2025. We ended up within about $2,400 of where we ended up in 2024, primarily because the first 8 months of the year, got us out to a really fast start. The last 4 months of the year, we're definitely below average. So in 2026, it's probably going to start out a little bit below average. So we're hoping to get a good tax season so that we can get more cars back on the street. We've got cars on hand. We've got them in the shops trying to get them out. So that's kind of where our 25 ended up over 24.
So and forgive me, because I know this wasn't part of your questions, but I know this is stuff you talk about and think about all the time. Like when you say your cash flow numbers came in just a little bit short, what are you including in that measurement? It's going to be payments, principal and interest, lease payments. It's going to be, are you including down payments or deposits from customers in that number, like all cash?
We look at total revenue. Cash spends, I can deposit. It's what I can deposit. You know what I mean? So I try not to, in the grand scheme of things, I try not to bucket it out too much. Okay. We look at what it takes to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
Gotcha. And I would just say, and we don't have to go any further there, but it strikes me that you probably spent less buying cars, in recent years because of the repo factor, or at least had a repo credit, at the auction or whatever coming back. So hopefully, that shakes out well for you. But I think, like many of us, and we can kind of make this tie in where we can as we go forward, because I think a lot of dealers, as we're recording this in early 2026, dealers are kind of resetting, and we're heading into tax refund season shortly, and so this is a time for us to reset and kind of figure out what does 26 look like for us in the buy here, pay here, and lease here, pay here space.
Right.
So we'll cover that as we step in. The next question that you chose was changes in underwriting. And in particular, what I really would like to understand from all the dealers I talk to here is, like, who doesn't qualify at your place?
Well, that's a great question. Obviously, somebody that doesn't have very much income. We try to be very cognizant of the payment to income. The last thing we ever want to do is set a customer up for failure, because if we set them up for failure, then obviously we're going to be a failure as well. We try to do smart lending. We have to be aware of what it takes to keep this train moving down the track. And there are some people that do have lower income, but they don't have much housing cost. So that might take that out of the equation. We try to, just like any lender, based on how the portfolio is performing, whether it's creating cash or it's not, loosen maybe our underwriting guidelines a little bit. But we still want to make sure that we don't get over 25% payment to income. That's a big deal to us. And that's without insurance, of course. Insurance has gone up. That's I missed a deal. I had a deal going Monday on a customer, and $485 a month, but his insurance came in at $200 a month. So now then he's like, I can't afford $685 a month on a nice car. So that cost us a deal. So we're trying to find a little bit cheaper car. So maybe we can get back down into the $350 a month on it. So underwriting, it's kind of like an accordion: open, close, open, close, open, close.
Yeah.
But I think that's the same thing that Ally Financial does, Ford Motor Credit. Any of them do is opening and closing. And I know when we were at the franchise, you could always see that, whether the lenders are looser this month or not. So I think we have to do the same thing to make sure that we maintain our cash flow.
Yeah, good. You mentioned income is obviously one thing that a lot of dealers will look at in terms of who wouldn't qualify. Obviously, got to have enough income to support the payment. And then what about people that are new to the area? Like, how do you generally feel about those?
So obviously it depends is the answer. You knew we were going to get there eventually. Why are they in the area? Are they here because they're on a mobile job? They're on a contract job? Are they here because they have family here? It comes down to the why. And we do have some manufacturing jobs in the area that are contract basis. Is that a 12-month contract? Is that a 2-year contract? What is that? So we have to dig a little bit deeper if somebody is new to the area or changing jobs. Another thing, if they're changing jobs, are they changing jobs to better themselves, or are they just changing jobs because they got upset where they were at? Right. There's been a lot of talk recently about, do you want somebody that's been on the job a set period of time and they're getting ready to change jobs? Or do you want somebody that just changed jobs? Because normally people will have a job for a year anyway. So if they just changed jobs and they bettered their situation, hopefully the first year of my agreement with them will be good as well.
Yeah. I like that you're digging into the why. And I know, hearing you break that down, I know that we can all be guilty sometimes of overthinking it. And, we're all trying to do some smart underwriting. And it's funny that, you've been in these conversations with other dealers where, we think we got it figured out, and then we see some wrinkles, right? To say that didn't work after all. So it's just funny to me. We laugh to avoid crying, right? Exactly. On the underwriting side, it's a hard thing to figure out, and we're all working to kind of get it dialed in.
I try not to overanalyze. We can postmortem some of these deals to death, and I think it's definitely something that we have to look at. Yeah. But people are people, and all people are different. So I don't want to pigeonhole one thing because somebody didn't make it to the end of their contract or didn't make it far enough past break even. That's another thing we try to look at. We didn't really talk about our KPIs, but what's our break even point? At what point do we start having the car paid for and moving forward to covering overhead?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Good. And I think that's important because, like you say, sometimes just because the loan didn't have the outcome you were looking for, maybe it ended up in repo, it doesn't mean that it necessarily costs you so much that you couldn't afford taking that same chance again, right? We're in the risk business after all. And so if we scaled back and tried to take no risk at all, we wouldn't produce any business. And so that's kind of the nature of the balance that we live in. But yeah, I appreciate that. That's good information. So what about your team? Like, how many people do you have? And I know you have a service department. So let's talk about that and kind of talk to me about how your service department came to be and some of that.
From right after we opened, we opened in, like I said, May of 2008. I was the only employee, did everything by myself. There eventually, after we got to 50 accounts, we started hiring some other people. And then a quick lube facility a block away came open. So we rented that, started doing some minor repairs there, some oil changes there. I bought another facility in our Duncan location, primarily because it had about 10,000 square feet of service capacity, where my previous location only had probably 2,500. So as we all know, this business is about keeping the cars running, keeping the service going. So now that we've got about 15 employees on average, we'll gain one, lose one, gain one, lose one, of course. Mm-hmm. So we run about 6 on the front side. Our business's model is quite a bit different than the others. We do run 3 little sister stores. None of them are really enough to make a big store, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But they work for us, and we have 2 people in each location, and that's what helps us get to cash flowing where we need to be. We have 2 service departments, one in Chickasha and one in Duncan. So we have to run a little bit. So therefore, I got to have a couple of more detailers. I got to have a couple of more ATECs or something to fill these shops up. Another thing that we did in service over the last couple of years since COVID seems like, man, these reman or used motors, used transmissions, it's nothing for them to tell us $3,500 on a used motor. Well, if I'm replacing a 115,000 mile motor with a 100,000 mile motor, I mean, I'm almost to that motor breaking down just like the first one broke down.
Yeah.
So those motors and transmissions have got so expensive. I've got a guy that loves building motors. So it takes longer for us to rebuild motors. We tear them down. We have parts washers. We run them through. We redo our heads. So we do, when you say heavy line, we tear a motor down to a long block or to a short block and totally rebuild it. So that takes longer. It takes more people to do that. The offset is of course, we don't get as many cars out as you go to a convention and everybody's like, oh, I get this many cars out. Well, we're going down to the bolts and the nuts, and we even rebuild some transmissions. Kits aren't that expensive, so we go that route too instead of. I've always been that. My wife and I, we will remodel our own houses, even if we don't know how to do it. We'll tear it apart and figure out how to put it back together. And if we have to do it twice, it's the same price as hiring somebody else to do it the first time. And maybe we learn along the way. Mm-hmm. And maybe a liability becomes an asset here before long.
Yeah, no, I feel that. So I'm curious just to know if you, on your engine and transmission rebuilds, do you sometimes do that with a customer who's in an active account, or is it primarily your repos? And
both, both. If, we all know that the GM 2.4s, the pistons are bypassing the oil. If you don't rebuild that motor, the replacement motor is going to use the oil. We have to rebuild that motor to get it to stop using oil. So a lot of times we'll try to do that maybe in the recon phase before we send it out. It's not always that easy, but yes, we'll rebuild it with a customer. We'll get them to participate if the vehicle service contract doesn't pay for that, and get them a good car. Yeah. Or a lot of times, if it's going to be a big deal, we try to trade the customer out maybe on a car that's already been taken care of. Keep the customer happy, keep the customer paying.
Nice. Well, you said we all know the 2.4 is a problem. Actually, we don't all know. I don't know that. I'm a finance guy and a podcaster, so I didn't
Right.
know that. But but 15 years since I've been a dealer, basically. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Like that's the kind of information that you guys as dealers live in, and so obviously that you get to where you learn what you have to do, and
Mhm.
sometimes you pay for a learning curve. But we're all going to pay for those things one way or another, right? And writing a
We all have
$3,500 check to somebody's tough.
right. We all have to pay for the school we go to.
Amen. And I think you'd rather see that 3,500 go in your text pocket than to some LKQ or some third party out there.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. Your current biggest bottleneck. A lot of our people say inventory and buying and getting them on the front line. So what's it going to be for you?
I looked at this question. That was such a loaded question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, our I feel like the consumer sentiment index is in the low 50s. That's just reality. Kind of tells us what society is thinking at any given time. When you ask me what's my biggest bottleneck, I kind of think I have a bottleneck at each step. I feel like our lead count is down. We're struggling to get our customers to respond to us in a quick fashion. They send the leads and then we struggle to get a hold of them. I think parts are at an extreme high price based on tariffs or whatever the cost might be. I don't know if there's any one biggest bottleneck, but if I have to pick something, it's probably going to get cars through service. But we don't want to just go back to putting in used motors to create an additional problem 3 months down the road from where we're at. So our biggest bottleneck is going to be service, getting cars in and out.
Okay. So maybe ask the question a different way. Like, are there other things in your business that come to mind that are sources of your most common frustrations or headaches, like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? Anything else come to mind that we didn't talk about?
Sure. Gig work. Just this last week, I've got cars that have showed back up that are 40,000 miles over, 20,000 miles over where they should be. Gig work, we can look at unemployment rates. Unemployment rates are decent in Oklahoma right now, but that's only based off of people that are really kind of looking for a job and based on getting unemployment as a source of income. A lot of people are out here doing gig work and they're driving our cars an obscene amount of miles and breaking them down sooner. So if we're doing a 20,000 mile annual lease, and so therefore a 3-year deal, that's a 60,000 mile lease. If they're putting 30,000 miles a year or 60,000 miles a year on a car, we're trying to up those payments and help the customer understand that we want the depreciation on the car to match the note. So the gig work and the miles is a big issue as well, which creates a service problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that we're obviously seeing a lot of what you're calling gig work as your DoorDash drivers and Instacart kind of thing, and so there's a lot happening, and it kind of makes sense that we'd see that, because from my view, it looks like a fallback position for a lot of people who find themselves out of work or whatever. That ends up being a place where they can find some income fairly quickly, but that does put a lot of miles on the car that they're driving, and they're going to have to accept financial responsibility, and often they don't have the money. To keep up with that, their payment would have to go to $1,000 a month or some big number, right? And that's not going to work either. So it's a complex new problem, and I'm sorry to hear that's a regular frustration for you. But anything else come to mind on the bottleneck side before we move into the others?
No, I don't think so. A lot of people, like you say, are employed. They might have a day job, but maybe that day job isn't getting them to the end of the month.
Right.
So now they have to supplement that somewhere, and it's probably going on, even maybe not on a full-time basis, on a part-time basis, to help people get to the end of the month.
Right. So, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Let's jump into recent accomplishments, whatever time period it makes sense for you, but what can you point to that's been a recent achievement or accomplishment you feel good about?
In the last year, met a guy out in San Diego a couple of years ago at the LHPH summit, a guy by the name of Steve out of the Boston area. And he got me going on these third-party appraisals, invoking third-party appraisals on our total losses. And since I've started that, we are averaging an additional $2,470 on every total loss, because now we are invoking third-party appraisals. We're getting the insurance companies to pay a fair and equitable settlement instead of, they're like a lot of us. They have a low figure, a medium figure, and a high figure. And every time they propose the low figure to us to begin with, and they will fight and try to defend that figure. We have to be better than that to understand that we're not going to accept the low figure. So every time we do not accept that low figure, we gain an additional $2,470. And I think over a year's time, that adds up to be a lot of money. That'll help buy parts.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I hope our people are paying attention on that. A lot of folks going to be reaching out to you, trying to track down that information, because that is a big number. And so that's and it also just kind of points to a frustration in that without that third party in the picture, those insurance companies are essentially looking to take advantage of us, pay below market. And so we've got to know how to act to protect our interests there, and sound like you found a solution. So good for you. Anything else?
No, I agree. Just like in sales, we always say a customer's looking for a salesperson, or they just keep shopping. If we don't keep demanding that we get a fair and equitable settlement on our accounts, we're not going to get that. We're just going to take what they give us and move on.
Yeah. And it feels like having a third party in the picture would probably add some strength to your position, right? So It kind of feels like that probably adds a layer too. But let's move on to the last question you chose, which is advice you would give to someone. And I share with you before we start our conversation here that I just talked to somebody, I think earlier this week, and this is somebody who was in business many years ago. I think they said they left the business in 2004 maybe, but they had had a lot of success in the business, then moved into some other kind of entrepreneurial things and sold off their buy here, pay here business. And so in talking to him, it was interesting, as opposed to somebody who's brand new, never been in it. Mm-hmm. He's asking, what's the landscape for buy here, pay here right now? So I was able to share with him a little bit about that. But why don't you answer first? Like, let's think about that guy, somebody who's away from it. They know they have the resources to do it. So let's first talk about your perspective on, is this a good time to get in the business?
Oh, it's hard to time the market, in anything you do. I look back on May of 2008. Everybody asked me, well, how did y'all make it through the 2008-09 crisis? Well, when you start at zero and you sell one car, you've got a lot more cars than you had. You sell another car, you just doubled your business. So if you're growing, any time I think is a good time. This business is profitable. It's the reason why we're in it. And I think any time is a good time.
Yeah, the demand is always going to be there, right? Our customer, unless everybody just overnight improves their credit score, there's always going to be a demand for, some sort of a subprime solution. Yep. And you could make the case that right now, what I shared with the gentleman, I said, it's my belief that in 2026, you're going to actually have fewer buy here, pay here dealers in most markets than you had 2 years ago. Because a lot of people are folding up their tents. And so I would say, I would share your sentiment. I generally would say business is the same as it's always been, but we've seen a roller coaster of charge-offs the last couple of years, but it still feels like it's the right time. So now let's talk about the somebody who's just never been in it. What advice would you give to somebody thinking about getting in it?
My first advice is don't try to be someone you're not. Yeah. You have to have good roots. You've got to have a good foundation. Be you, be honest, be open, be transparent, have integrity, grow slow. You know what I mean? This business can eat cash pretty quick.
Yeah.
Do not outrun your capital. You can sell your way out of business just like you can collect your way out of business.
Right.
Carve your niche. Doesn't matter what the guy across the street's done, the guy next door to you. Stay in your lane. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And do deals for the right reason. I've kind of got a saying. I tell customers a lot. I'll never try to gain a car deal for the wrong reason, and I would rather lose it for the right reason than I had gain it for the wrong reason. Meaning, I'm not going to put somebody in a car that we just absolutely know is not going to work. So have integrity, be you, and most importantly, grow slow.
So, the white hat way coach in me can't let that thing go about integrity. I appreciate what you shared there. And I would ask you to expand just on enough, like I can appreciate how having integrity helps you feel good about yourself, right? And the way you do business and sleep good at night. Right. Talk to me about how it impacts your business.
Well, I think first and foremost, it has to help your staff. The staff knows that, one of the questions down here is, how do we perceive ourselves in the industry? Your staff always wonders if they want to go work for a buy here, pay here place. They have to wonder if they want to go work for a used car dealer. Right. But at the end of the day, they want to work for somebody that, I've said it before, is open, honest, and transparent in everything we do. So you have to be who you are. You have to carry that forward to your staff. You have to make sure that the processes that they do and what your company stands for is carried forward to the customer. And we will all get a bad review from time to time. And they're all pretty much the same. Either the car broke down and didn't have any kind of service contract. So now then the customer's mad that the dealer's not going to pay for it. The customer was repossessed, so therefore they're upset. Or it's a disgruntled former employee that, to be honest, didn't do their job and didn't make the cut. Right. So let's do the right thing at the right time every time.
Good. I love it. And I got to believe that pays off for you in your vendor relationships and the markets that you do business in, right? I mean, whether it's a parts company or any of those folks around your area that you do business with, if they know they can rely on you to be the same as yesterday, that's worth a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we pay parts on a weekly basis just so those accounts don't get too high. And if I forget or I'm gone for a couple of weeks, they're not calling me. They know they're going to walk in one morning and that account will be at a zero balance. So yeah. Good. Hopefully that's earned over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes life a little easier, makes business easier to conduct. And so I applaud you for that. Well, Joe, thanks for making time. Again, this is Joe Powell out of Southwest Oklahoma, Lease Here Pay Here dealer, been there since 2008. And I know you're busy, Joe. I appreciate you making time to talk with us.
You bet. Thanks, Jim.